I can pull it up and see if that'll.
Cool. So we're having a few issues with potential video here again. So what we're trying to do is we've dropped Tom off from the video of it. We're just seeing if we can bring up his slideshow and he can talk to it, because that's the important stuff. If we can get through that, then we'll be away laughing. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hopefully we can get you some cool stuff to look at and listen to. All right. So I can see your slides, Tom. Do you want to bring them up? No John today. He's not feeling very well, so it's me and Tom, and hopefully we can get this week issue sorted. Not going so well. This may not be going to work. Hopefully. Zen, Jeff, Renee, and Thomas. I hope everybody is well and dandy on this Monday morning. So just for having a little bit of issues with the visual side of it and possibly the audio.
Let me see if my...
I'm not sure how well this is going to work today, unfortunately.
In the waiting room, though.
Do you want me to bring it up? Because I can do that easily enough.
Slide. Yeah, let's go ahead and bring it up, and then... Yeah, there we go.
I've got it up
so
on
folks
screen.
Can hear me?
Yeah, I think so. Everyone able to hear Tom? No dramas there?
Okay.
See how we go.
Might be a little... I'll go back and repeat it if something gets messed up.
Cool.
There.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get going here. Slide one. Nice contrast between different types of plants and colors. One thing that is sort of critical when discussing planted tanks really is what is the person's goal. Bits, and so you're going to have a method that works much better for somebody else's goal than, say, another person's. It causes a lot of confusion. And so there's different intensities of light, CO2 or not adding CO2, fertilizers, whether it's in the water column or in the sediment, and good basic care. Those are important. What is a planted tank? Also, that's just kind of a basic question. Back up and kind of ask what is it? Is it just a few plants, fully planted? Or fish primary or secondary? Is it marine plants or freshwater plants? A lot of different things can define what a plant tank is or is not. These are the main things as far as aquarists are concerned. What aquatic plants need to grow. They're in the water, so we don't have to worry about that part. That's the good part. They do need CO2, light, and then nutrients, mostly. They also need trimmed and kept maintained in a certain amount of volume. You just can't let them just keep growing and growing until it chokes the tank. Often you get a crash if that happens. So they need trimmed periodically. Good maintenance. So what type? Medium and high intensity, light. Low light's easier to keep. Medium somewhere in between, and high light's going to demand a a bit more work. If something goes wrong with the highlight tank, it goes wrong quick. Low light, not so much. It takes time for things to go bad there. Likewise, non-CO2 tanks do quite well, and they're often overlooked, and there's a strong bias towards CO2 enrichment. There's other things such as easy carb, CCAMXL, glutaraldehyde. These are more not really CO2 additives. They're more algicides. They don't contribute much as far as the carbon to any plant. There's emergent paludariums, vivariums, dry start method. Those work really well. Sediment in the nutrients or water column nutrients. Go either place. Either place. Reality is we get a little bit from everything, even if we have plain sand. Over time, that sand will gain some organic matter. Likewise, the water column. Old Buse tank. This is from about a decade ago. I still have it running, so it's nice. Doing quite well. Iwagumi style. I like it, but I don't want to give up a tank, a nice size tank. So I do a bonsai with it instead, and keep it in a bonsai pot outside rather than sacrificing a whole planted tank for it. It looks nice. It's interesting. It has dramatic impact. But for me personally, I like more diversity than this style provides. But it's a sort of feeling. This is very easy to keep. This is about around 4 meters long, 4 meter long. This is a small, shallow Buse tank, a non-CO2 tank we did, or I did for my house. It's about probably about 16 or about 18, 20 centimeters tall, something in there. And it's shallow, but it's non-CO2. All it has is a light and a small, it's plugged in. Everything, there's no heater, there's no anything else. I like this because it's so simple, and it's very stable, very easy to keep. The main thing you have to do is just add water for evaporation loss, but that was about it. There's some white cloud fish in there. They jump out though, so find fish chips. Here's a tank pieces of lava with epiphytes growing on them. I know this guy here. This is at the ADA. But I like this style. These rocks are sticking up, white sand. It's clean, easy to care for, and CO2 is less critical because you have low light and easy to grow plants. This one's a little bit higher light. Actually, a lot higher light, and still has. This was a hardscape I did, and if you put plants on the hardscape cover, all shown here, and you lose a lot of the hardscape if you plant too heavy, or your hardscape isn't designed with the plants in mind. And a lot of hardscapes emulate this similar style here, but they end up, nothing wrong with that. You can have a very nice aquarium with a nice hardscape and no plants, or maybe just a little touch of moss on the tops. or maybe a foreground plant instead. That would do well. Here's an example. This is from Jeff Sensky and Mike Sensky at Aquarium Design Group in Houston, United States. And this is what I collected and I sent to them, and they tried a lot of different things with it. And they still are. So light, that's where all growth starts. You gotta have light, and that's the first step in photosynthesis. Energy production for the plant. A lot of people think more is better for some reason. Nutrients, they tend to want to be very conservative with. Light, they oh, I can put more in there. Doesn't matter. But light drives CO2 and nutrient uptake. It's basically like the petro or the gas pedal driving a car. The faster you go, the more gas you're going to use, the more petrol. And if something goes wrong and you're going really fast, the crash is worse. And it's true. But if you have lower light, you don't have as much CO2 demand from the tank. And so you can get away with more variability or problems or other issues if you have low light, if you use CO2. And you could probably use less CO2 also. You don't have to push it up quite high. Let's see. This is a plant that was collected by hobbyist Liguia spherocarpa on the east coast of the United States, until you got it home and you put it underwater, and then it turned kind of interesting and pretty. There's also a dwarf form of this. It doesn't get as tall, it stays sort of short and stout rather than tall and lanky. This is the tall, lanky. Same tank again, Ricciardia. Nice epiphyte on wood. Our good friend, the Madagascar lace plant. Harlequin rasboras. Those are nice fish for plant tanks. Low light, that's often the case. You can go even lower with CO2 enrichment. You can really go down to very, very low levels. They're not CO2 to think about. I talked about CO2 enrichment. Are we biased? And it's true, we are. But the CO2 enrichment, it really dramatically increases the rates of growth, not just like by percent, like you can with, like, say, growing cannabis in a sealed room, and you enrich the atmosphere with CO2, and you get about maybe you get about 30% more growth. That's significant, particularly if you're raising it. For aquatic plants, though, it's even more dramatic. It's 10 to 24 times, so 1,000% to 20% more growth. That's much, much higher growth rates. Huge difference. Is this natural or balanced? Many people, I think in the 70s, the Dutch had a very strong debate on using CO2 or not to use CO2. It was very controversial. Some people thought it was cheating. And today it's kind of the other way around. Now CO2 is sort of very, very accepted. Let's keep going here. So growing plants without CO2, they still grow, but they grow much slower. So 10 to 24 times slower. And so it might take months or years for a tank to grow in. This might be more considered that balanced. Fish waste is the main input of plant food. and slower growth, less nutrient demand. No need for CO2 dosing, KNO3, other nutrients and things like that. Trade-off, well, you get fewer species. You get not as nice colors. You don't get quite growth. There's less species you can grow. So that's mostly it. Fish are pretty happy with non-CO2 tanks. And if you have tanks that have emergent growth like this, then they also grow. They have plenty because the diffusion from the air is much as 10,000 times faster than it is in. Here's a tank from Singapore, a friend there. This is quite old tank. It's probably 20 years old now. But it was even the fish are local, Grammies to Singapore, region within maybe 500 kilometers or so of the location. But this tank got a water tank at all, and it's back then. So how do you do it? Well, no water changes. I also don't do water changes for non-CO2 tanks very often. Seen from the start. Fish waste is the plant nutrient mostly, and for the same reason as CO2 limited by nutrients, and also the CO2. So, as I mentioned, plant growth. And people tend to know me a lot for this particular idea. It's not my idea either. And, I just took what other people were talking about already and just, simplified it a little bit and, suggested, well, let's not do water changes, or let's do more water changes. And then if you do a lot of water changes, well, then you don't have to test. As long as your water, in your water that you're putting in your tank is clean, you're in pretty good shape. And a lot of discus folks were doing this in the Bay Area and San Francisco in California, United States. And most people didn't get into the hobby to test water. And a lot of them they might start off doing it and think, well, it's just part of the deal that we had to do. But I think water changes, we pretty much knew we signed up for that when we got. Nope. Well, that's okay. That's a tank I did a while back. Some pictures of it already. I think I skipped a slide there. There. Oh, American alligator gar. I had some of those I caught locally when I lived in Florida. They're quite nice fish. They're not. They don't appear very aggressive in a planted tank. They're very. Come on. There we go. This is a growth or yield, or you could also put oxygen concentration of minerals in the dry matter, or concentration of nutrients in the water. You could have, if you don't have any nutrients, well, split here. So you have it doesn't go right down to zero. There's a minimum amount that you have to grow plants. Um, at that point, you have very low severe deficiency range. You still have some growth. It's a very narrow range. A lot of people like this range for aquarium plants, but it's also very narrow. And so your parts per million and dosing need to be very careful if you're in this range here. A little bit more. And that's just to the point people want to believe they're getting, but they're usually out here or they're somewhere out in D. Now, D is and that's very easy to add more nutrients and without worrying about getting somewhere out in here, right in this area here. You don't need to go way out here because the target is so huge. Band here, and you don't want to get down too low. You start killing your plants. And so I think for just the general idea of trying to target that with water changes and then dosing a few mil into your tank works quite well. It's been proven, I mean, for decades. I mean, 3 decades now, people have been that part we know. Getting people to use CO2 right might not work. that another picture. I lowered the water down on a water change. Come on. There we go. To get that reflection like that. And so I just the reflection so you could see back into the tank better. A little Elentine hydropiper there. That's a nice little plant. Not easy to very small leafed. Very nice little plant. Why can't I just keep adding more tanks? Well, fish waste tends to start off as ammonia, or ammonium in this case, not nitrate. Nitrate's for ammonia. Ammonia is very, very toxic. The other thing is O2 demand is increased greatly. And so you have a lot of things breathing and respiring. Gives off CO2. Yeah, the plants will take up the CO2, but, and they'll give off some oxygen, but also not at night. Plants don't give off oxygen at night. They actually take up oxygen. So you have a problem there. And so if you have low plant growth, relatively low plant growth, low rates of growth, or a few plants, it works good. Fish loads can balance. But if you have high density of plants, it becomes much more difficult to do. Nitrate toxicity for warm water fish. A lot of the sort of toxicity that our aquarists cite are often for trout, salmon fry. And if you look at different types of warm water fish, it's quite high. These are lethal concentrations for 50% of the fry to die. There's a review by Camargo, and they look at shrimp as well. And Camargo, that particular paper is quite good and shows toxicity is much higher in warm water fish and not these salmonoids. Salmonoids are very, very, very sensitive to nutrients. Very sensitive. Our fish, not so sensitive. If they were that sensitive, we wouldn't be able to keep them. Most people would kill them. Shrimp, So shrimp are actually really, really good as far as testing subjects. You could think about it as the old idiom, canary in the coal mine. And they breed really fast. So you get a generation times from egg to adult that can breeding. You can test toxicity, different nutrients, things like that. You can try over a wide range, a lot of things, and people have done that, and they've done it quite a bit. This one is from a Finnish woman who bred shrimp, crystal red shrimp specifically. Very environmentally weak organisms, much weaker than fish. This is some of mine. Another tank. This is just sort of a typical routine for a 80-liter aquarium, and do a 50% water change, roughly about 40 parts per million of CO2. Fertilizers, it can be done daily. Some people divide it into 7 days, versus some people just do it twice a week. The total amount is about the same in both cases, but that you add per week. Prune, clean, less work, or have trouble, use less light. That should be the first thing to do, is just reduce the light a little bit. Most people, cheap fish only light, but most times they have algae and a bunch of other issues. They have too much light. I tend to dose only about 3 things generally: potassium nitrate, monobasic potassium phosphate, maybe a trace metal mix. Usually CMS is very popular here. It's cheap. You might add some gypsum, Epsom salt, calcium sulfate, magnesium sulfate. For GH, if you have very soft water, I assume New Zealand probably has fairly soft water because you have plenty of rain, snow, as far as your drinking water and tap water. But you might need to add some GH. And I usually add probably about 1 degree, German scale, 1 to 2 degrees. You can add more for certain fish. Discus actually do quite nicely in moderate GHs. The KH, no, they like it soft. They like it near 0, but the GH can be higher. This plant has caused many problems for folks, and oh well, it can't handle the high nutrients. Well, there it is. There it is, and high nutrients. I'm dosing quite a bit of nitrogen and all that other stuff, and it's growing quite well. And so that falsifies certain claims, like, oh well, it can't grow under with high nutrients. It's like, well, yes it does, and there it is. There's the evidence. It's right there in front of you. You can't argue with that. You can say it's something else that causes your problem with the plant, but you can't say, independent of other factors, nutrients alone are the thing causing the problem for that plant. That principle of falsification, I'm not looking for cause. I'm just trying to rule things out, trying to narrow the possibilities down to what's going on with the problem. Okay, that doesn't sound too hard. Just do the water changes, add the ferts. Low light tanks, however, they'll greatly benefit from high CO2. And so it's slow down the growth of the plants. You can also pick plants that grow slower too, hair grass, ferns, things. Tends to be a lot a very easy to care for tank at that point. Light is not better. It's what I call highlight disease, and it's very, very common and prevalent in the United States and other few other places. But mostly it's a US. I think it's mostly a USA thing. People outside of the US have a little bit of more reasoning when it comes to this issue. Oh, what a beautiful tank. Mud. That's that ADA soil, and it's old soil there at that point. I'm just doing a quick hardscape. This seemed like a good idea at the time, but I was knocking over wood. There was not enough space in here for the plants themselves, and filled it up. This complex design, it's pieced together. There's some rocks and some wood. And I was kind of like, yeah, do this nice hardscape, but then what? It wasn't very suitable for a large, nice, dense plant tank. And so there's different styles of hardscaping that one needs to do to come up with a nice garden that has a nice, array of different species. Most of the aquascape contests, they don't have a lot of interesting species. They have a lot of basic plants, a lot of mosses, a lot of buccephaloandras, ferns, maybe some vowels and grasses in the background, maybe a few stem plants, maybe a little bit of color, but they're focused more on the hardscape. And so the hardscape is primary in most competitions, and almost all is the only plants are the main theme. Everything else is more hardscape competition to me. And that's fine. It looks awesome, and it's pushed the hobby in kind of an interesting direction. Tray, pretty much like creating a little bonsai, basically. Then I could add some moss to this or other epiphytes, and boom, got me a little nice hardscape. Open top, and so this is an old tank. This is at least 30 years old. One of the first sort of full planet I did, and only the highest light. I went and got the highest light. So I got two metal high, 60 centimeter by 75 centimeter tank, and a pennywort all on the back to hide any of the cables and everything. Overflow, hang on overflow. And I also used do-it-yourself yeast CO2 for this tank. And my old tank had an apartment or a condominium with some other roommates when I was first started going to college. Emergent plants. So I grew quite a bit of cryptococcine about that same time, about 30 years ago. And this is a picture from Jan Bastemir's page, Lingua. And it was a rather difficult plant back in the day. Not so much today. Have trouble growing plants underwater. These sort of drip down waterfalls. This is in Hawaii. This one I think is in Europe, a friend of mine's. And got a lot of things, but there's not a whole lot of plants in the sediment there. This is a rare plant, Air Carolina location in the Western Ghats of India, and that also. So a friend of mine from India, he immigrated here, got married here. He brought some of these in, as sold of them, and I started growing them like mad, and everybody liked them, and they saw these cool little pictures, and they're like, oh, wow, I got to have that. And so it's very popular, and so it'll be maintained in the hobby at this point. And even if it goes extinct in the wild, there's a lot of fish in that same boat, unfortunately, around the world. Then there's a plant. Speaking of pictures, here's a algae. Everybody gets it at some point. It doesn't matter who you are, no matter how good you are, you will get it. A mono, he was asked, I think once, along with me, how long it took till we actually had some control before we could grow plants well without algae. He said about years just to beat black brush algae. It took him 10 years. It took me about 3. But green algae, like a lot of folks end up getting, and it's very, very difficult to get rid of it. A lot of work. So this is about 3 days later. Replanted everything, removed it by hand, trimmed, cleaned the tank, did a big water change, and now I'm back. But I had to do a lot of work to get it going back again nicely. 2.5 weeks in the Philippines, and then came back, and the CO2 ran out. And so this is all from bad CO2, and everything else going on. That's why I got the algae. CO2. And that's probably 95% of the problem. Enough CO2. Or you could lower the light, and then you would have probably okay on the CO2. Sediments, we had some of the nutrients. Sometimes we might want to just use plain sand, add it to the water column. But I think it makes the most logical sense to add them in both locations as a backup. So if you forget to add something to the water column, you have a backup in the sediment. If you want to run it leaner in the water column, sediment. Sediment can hold quite a bit of nutrients, but it runs out of nitrogen after a few months, maybe a year. Only one that really needs to add it afterwards. But the phosphate, the iron, a lot of the trace metals, they can last for years in a sediment. Nitrogen is the one that it runs out of. So I talked about doing, but can we do them without water changes? Also, run high light, rich CO2, even planted tank folks. And the answer is yes. This tank I didn't do any water changes on. It's just neglected. I didn't do any aquascaping either, but you could do it if you wanted. It was mostly rich CO2, very rich CO2, and aqua soil, the clay, kind of clay type soils. Those work really, really well. On this tank, I fed them at least daily, a little bit. So there's a little bit of nutrients coming in. I add water for evaporation loss also, but I don't do a whole lot of work on these. Maybe once every 3 to 5 months, I'd do a water change. Not much. And they're clean tanks. They didn't get algae at all. It was kind of crazy. Here's that same rich sediment. I'm adding more nutrients here. Things grow faster, much faster here. A guy named Paul Krumboltz, he's passed away. He was a pretty interesting guy. Did a lot of home do-it-yourself kind of approaches to planted tanks. Bob Olson, another gentleman who many years ago, did a lot of work with on the Aquatic Plants Digest, an old listserv of a lot of international group of people got interested in plants. A tank locally, 240 tank with Valsinaria. This Valsinaria species here actually came from the lake. The gentleman owns this. He traveled there, got some Tropheus lamps, a couple other lamps. I wanted a tank like this with a couple species from Tanganyika, but never got around to it. I'm not sure if I will, but maybe I will. I don't know. Who knows? Can't say. What the future holds. Here's a location in Florida, United States, out in the Everglades, and this one's up by Cedar Key. That's right where a hurricane just went over not long ago. There's a couple little alligators, American alligators, right here, and the mother's got to be more up back in here. But this is just a drainage ditch, and it's loaded with a lot of aquatic plants. Here's a mermaid weed, and it is called a weed for a good reason in Florida. It is a weed. It grows everywhere. It's a difficult plant for a lot of people to grow well in aquariums, though. Here are a bunch of nerites, snails, olive nerites in this case, and there are just millions of them there crawling around. That's a Liliopsis. There's one from New Zealand. This is ours from the United States, Liliopsis Carolina. And it's kind of an interesting variety of that in that genus. Sort of a cypress pond swamp. This is where I collected a lot of plants. Took a lot of trips to some of these areas. Always liked them. A lot of insects biting you here. There's probably 10, 15 different species of things that are biting you and sucking your blood there. These are some freshwater crayfish. Another interesting guy, Gorgonzophar. He did a lot of work and a lot of aquascapes, holding up a Plecostomus species. These have invaded Florida and the state of Florida in the United States, and they're all over. The native analogs that grow in the United States like them. And so they cut issues, things like that. But they're kind of a curiosity for a lot of the locals. They like catching them and pulling. Here we go out to California in the United States. Another 4,000 or so kilometer foot. Some other species more associated with northern areas because we're up real high in the altitude. Latitude is still pretty low, but we have these same species much farther north, up in Canada and British Columbia. Same species, but it's down near down near sea level there. A part of Yosemite. We have some interesting mosses, some Callitrichthys. These are more annual plants, and big waterfalls and waterfalls and some of the sort of streams that come off this cliff face. This is probably probably 1,000 meters here. So it's quite a distance. This is a huge one. That other pondweed came from these two lakes. I think that's Lake Saprina and Sardine Lake. Yeah, that's not far from my house, about an hour and a half drive. Up to the redwoods, there's some that grow here where I'm at. I have a huge one right next door to me. probably 60 meters tall at least. They have the streams there. I haven't gone back there in a while to collect these particular liverworts, but I would like to. Trees are massive. There's my wife. No, she's not 2 feet tall. It's not a little kid or something, but that's a real dense forest here. This is a Prairie Creek Redwood State Forest, and it's one of the best ones, I think, for redwood forest. Very, very, very dense, lush vegetation. I think a lot of folks in New Zealand would love this place because maybe feel more like home there. Some of the dense forest you guys have too. I would say your own habits determine that method. Some are lazy, forgetful. You know who you are. That would probably be a good idea. Some are very interested in, they mess with stuff every single day. That kind of thing. Probably CO2 enrichment would. Both methods can really help you find what's best for you. And I usually suggest people keep one nice tank with CO2, lots of work, and then several non-CO2 plants, and they don't require as much work. You can have lots of those and just one that you have to do a lot of work on. That's a good balance for a lot of folks. These are more human issues rather than aquarium issues. That way or single method that applies to everyone, and that causes a lot of conflict in advice. There's a Dutch tank. There's no hardscape here. Maybe a piece of wood for the moss to grow on. Something. This is Wim's tank. If you haven't tried a non-CO2 planted tank, if you've never tried CO2, give that a try. If you master several methods, you can help other aquarists, no matter what their goal are. If you master several methods, so that's a good. And there you go, kicking back in my native habitat by a waterfall.
All right, I'm off mute now. Cool, thank you. We've had a few questions come through, or a couple of questions come through while we were talking. Yeah, we're a bit scratchy, but I think for the best part, everyone got it out, so that's cool. What would you consider to be high light, medium light, and low light? Oh, we might be having audio issues again. No, I think that might be us. Yeah, can't hear us again. I'll type it into our private chat and see how that goes. What do you consider, as I talk and type at the same time?
Let's just type the question.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll just put that into our little private chat and see how we go. Cool. So I've got 20 to 40 U-moles for low light, 40 to 70 for medium light, and 80 to 120 in high light. Next question is, what ratio do you think plants uptake fertilizer from the water to the substrate? Unfortunately, the audio is not really doing what it's meant to be doing, sadly. So roughly a 40 to 60 ratio between water and substrate would be the uptake of fertilization for plants. The majority of that will be coming through the sediment as opposed to the water column. Do you know how to cure Anubias rot? Do you have a cure for Anubias rot? Oh, that might be a head scratcher. Once again, apologies for the lack of audio or the audio issues that we're having. Usually just good CO2 and care and water changes should cover the Anubias rot. That's all the questions that we have. So due to the issues we have with the audio, we've got another question. Doing a 50% water change 2 times a week, African cyclic tank with plants, dosing. I wonder if I can copy and paste it. I can't copy and paste that. See if Tom can read that. We've seen large commercial growers with Anubias production be completely wiped out with Anubias rot, unfortunately. It looks like you can see the question on the screen, I hope. %, water change 2 times a week on an African cyclic tank with plants, dosing every day. Will it be helping or will it not be there long enough? All the Snow White, all the Anubias Snow White Petite are from Tom. That's incredibly amazing. We've only just got that plant into the country, into New Zealand, not long ago. That is fantastic. Wow. Oh, that's a shame. It seems to be working okay. Apparently, the farm lost all of their Snow White Anubias Petite, and they sold some to Tom 10 years ago. His colony had no issues, and so obviously he's managed to get back to the farm and back into everybody's hands, which is cool. 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 Well, we might leave it at this. Seems a little bit weird just talking to myself and then replying back to messages. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to leave them in the stream, and I will do my best to ask Tom after the fact and see if we can get some answers running through that, if that's all right with him and all right with everybody else. They got the rot disease, not cool. Okay. Cool. That's a thumbs up. So we'll leave it at that. So if anybody else has other questions after the fact, I'll fire them through, and hopefully we can get some more questions answered. Thank you very much for your time, Tom. It's greatly appreciated. Unfortunately, we obviously had a few audio issues, but as someone mentioned a little bit further up, your knowledge is very valuable, and everyone has appreciated your time. So thank you very much. All right, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy your Monday or Sunday if you're watching in America. Thank you very much, everybody.